The free agency frenzy continued Tuesday with another rash of signings across the NFL, including the Red Rifle finding a new holster in Chicago. The Bears and quarterback Andy Dalton came to terms on a one-year, $10 million deal. Dalton was 4-5 last season in relief of Dak Prescott following the franchise QB's season-ending ankle injury in Dallas. Then joined veteran QB Nick Foles in Chicago's quarterback room. Joining us now with more on the Dalton deal and beyond, CBS Sports senior NFL writer Jonathan Jones. JJ, the Bears reportedly make a strong push for Russell Wilson that fell short, leaving the team with a consolation prize of Andy Dalton. I think I speak for a large portion of the city of Chicago when I ask why. Nick Foles is under contract, not that that's the answer. There doesn't seem to be a market for Mitch Trubisky in free agency, at least a big market at that, and at least he's mobile. If you're going to build a bridge to nowhere, why make that bridge Andy Dalton?
You do speak for so much of Chicago. I hear the Bears fan in you, Joe. Listen, I appreciate the question, and it's a fair one because you can look at Mitch Trubisky and you can look at least at what Andy Dalton has been over the last 2 seasons and say, well, what's the real difference? Well, there's not a huge one except for general manager Ryan Pace. He can't rightly look his fans and his boss in the eye and say, well, yeah, we're going to run it back again with Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles. There has to be something different than last season. And so obviously the Washington football team taking Ryan Fitzpatrick, they're off the market. If Marcus Mariota were ever available for a trade, I'm not entirely sure he is now available for a trade. You have Sam Darnold, but the Jets are asking a lot for him right now. And do you want to get into that protracted back and forth negotiation where you may wind up losing him? Or do you strike now with the guys who are available? And I think that's the math that the Chicago Bears ultimately did. They were never in the running for Deshaun Watson. If Russell Wilson liked the Chicago Bears, and obviously the Chicago Bears liked Russell Wilson back, it still took the Seattle Seahawks letting go of Russell Wilson, which was really never going to happen, and I would be surprised if it ever will happen, at least this year. So with all of those things sort of in the pot, in your cauldron, what you wind up with is, well, you probably just got to take the best of what's realistic. And I know that Andy Dalton's best days are probably 4 or 5 years ago. But if he can play like he did in the second half of the season, rather than when he initially took over for Dak Prescott, maybe you get marginally better quarterback play. And then, all right, you rebuild that offensive line a little bit, and the defense continues to play strong. And maybe Eddie Jackson gets back to those Pro Bowl ways back there. And so now you got a team that doesn't just sneak into the playoffs, but maybe they can win that opening game there in the playoffs. They're never going to beat the Saints last year, of course. But if you can just get a little bit better, more consistent play from the quarterback position, then you'll be all right, and all right in very relative terms. And obviously Andy Dalton is a safe and consistent guy there at quarterback.
Football purgatory, Chicago IL. Another quarterback deal is done, this time in Houston. The franchise coming to terms with Tyrod Taylor on a one-year deal worth up to $12.5 million. JJ, David Culley has maintained that Deshaun Watson is and will be their quarterback week 1. Is this a deal to build depth or the first visible admission that they are taking Watson to the open market?
Well, it could be both. Depends on how you view it. Well, listen, you say up to $12.5 million, and of course, there's a lot of incentives that are baked into that. And I think that we all understand at this point, at least that point of NFL contracts. What this sort of does is it helps the Houston Texans position as they posture against Deshaun Watson, saying, hey, we're not letting you go, and let's say you don't show up for OTAs or mandatory minicamp if we have them, or training camp. Well, we have a guy, a mobile guy, a proven guy who can come in here and take some of those reps. And can obviously, we know that he's a solid backup quarterback, one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. We know that he could mentor a younger guy if the Texans wind up moving on from Deshaun Watson and bring someone else in. And so this really does help the Texans in any number of ways. Obviously, chief among them having a solid backup quarterback. If he has to start, we know that he is a viable starter, can give you some quality starter reps. You don't want him starting week 1 if you don't have to, but he can get the job done. But really, more importantly, it's a little bit of posturing towards Deshaun Watson saying, listen, we have no intention right now of trading you. And this is going to be a guy who, we don't want to roll with him into the season, but we will. I still, again, believe that this is a gigantic mistake by the Houston Texans to let this drag out. They should absolutely be working with Deshaun Watson and his representation to find not only the best place for Deshaun Watson, but the most value that they can get in return for their high-value, currently non-performing asset. Deshaun Watson, 25-year-old franchise quarterback coming off a career year, and his arrow is pointing up. It's just that he's not going to be playing in Houston anymore. The Houston Texans, as soon as they begin to realize that and understand that their value on Deshaun is going to greatly diminish following the first round of the NFL draft, they will certainly have to make a move. To the Houston Texans, they say, we don't have to make a move right now. That's not exactly true, but we'll see. I do think that by the end of April, if the Houston Texans are able to understand what's good for them and their organization, they would have, by that point, traded Deshaun Watson.
Well, you should see how it all unfolds in H-Town. Elsewhere, the Giants afforded Leonard Williams some long-term security with a 3-year, $63 million extension, 45 of which comes fully guaranteed. They tagged Williams a week ago, then found some financial wiggle room by reworking Nate Solder's deal, releasing Kevin Zeitler, more 3D cap chest to make some space here. What's the next potential move for the G-Men?
Well, this was a good move for them because they had him on that franchise tag, as you allude to, and this frees up about $8 million or so in cap space for the New York Giants. And then it obviously gets them in a position where they made that trade for him a couple of years ago, and it didn't look like it was going to work out. He had underperformed with the New York Jets. He gets the Giants underperforming, and then boom, gigantic year this season in Patrick Graham's defense, being moved around like a chess piece, and really kind of found his footing there with the Giants. So this helps them out, obviously long term. It helps them out right now with the salary cap, and you mentioned those moves. Obviously the Giants at this point have to go out and find themselves a wide receiver. Maybe they're going to wait until the draft to get someone, because this draft is very clearly going to be chock full of fantastic young wideouts, but I still think that they're going to need to find a veteran who is not John Ross, a speedster that they signed coming off pretty disappointing career so far with the Cincinnati Bengals, who drafted him in the top 10. They signed him to a deal that frankly is so low they don't have to keep him on the roster once they begin the season, but hopefully things do work out for him. They have a glaring hole there at wide receiver. They're going to have to fill it. I could see them, again, adding a little bit more veteran leadership along the offensive line as well. Those are probably the two spots for the Giants as they try to get back to the top of the NFC East here in Daniel Jones' third year.
On the topic of wide receivers, the Jaguars got their future QB, a nice target in Marvin Jones. Jones saw nice success over his 5 years in Detroit, fell just short of a second career 1,000-yard season last year. There's going to be plenty of new pieces for Urban Meyer to play with come September. How do you like this piece of the puzzle?
I like it. I already liked the wide receivers that they had there, and it seems that they have no intention of bringing back Keelan Cole, but you know, they drafted Laviska Shenault, and he has played incredibly well there. I still think while they have some really good wide receivers, while they went out and signed former Carolina Panthers tight end Chris Manhurst, they still need to find another tight end. The Jaguars do. But this is a solid veteran signing, a guy with a little bit of age on him. He's long in the tooth in terms of NFL years. You know, not only a young team, a rebuilding team, a team trying to establish culture and identity can lean on, but certainly a guy that a young quarterback like Trevor Lawrence can look to in the locker room and figure out how to go about things. So I think this is a really good and smart signing by the Jags. I know that folks had been waiting for the Jags to sort of make some noise, and you know, in the past several years they've been big spenders in free agency. Well, hasn't exactly worked out for them because every other year they're picking in the top 10. The other reason is because they've been such a bad team over the years, they had to spend extra in free agency. It's what I like to call the bad team tax. So maybe they're still spending a little bit of that. They have so much cap money with this team, but obviously Urban Meyer and general manager Trent Baalke are being judicious with their signings so far this